Okay, so today I wanted to talk a bit about the case that happened recently in Ohio where a 10-year-old girl was assaulted and had to travel to a nearby state of Indiana to seek an abortion. Now, I don't really want to be the type of person that takes advantage of other people's tragedies in order to make a political point, but at the same time, I also think it's valuable to learn from things that happen and improve upon them in order to prevent these types of tragedies from happening again in the future. And America always faces this problem where we are always looking at these horrible situations which we do nothing about until after they happen, or in most cases, we do nothing at all even after. So yes, I'm going to talk about this 10-year-old victim because I think it's a lesson we can learn in order to rethink what we did regarding Roe v. Wade. So in case you live under a rock, this 10-year-old girl had to travel to Indiana in order to seek an abortion, which was not possible in the state of Ohio, which we'll get into a bit more later. This is a perfect example of an extreme scenario happening. Pro-life advocates often bring this up regarding rape and incest as an argument against abortions, but I always have to stress, just because they are rarer in comparison to people getting pregnant by choice does not mean they do not happen. In the United States, there are over a few 100,000 rape victims per year in the United States alone. That's a lot. Of course, not every victim ends up pregnant. Somewhere around 25,000 to 32,000 people unfortunately end up that way, which means restricting abortion is a massive middle finger to these people, and that number isn't insignificant by any means. It's easy to think, oh, only 1 or 2% of pregnancies are the result of rape, therefore it doesn't matter and we should ban abortions anyway. But if you think in absolute numbers, 30,000 people, it's a whole different story, isn't it? And this 10-year-old girl is absolute proof that this happens in our society and it affects real people here in the United States. So no, they should absolutely not be ignored when considering the matter of abortion. The state of Ohio currently bans abortions after 6 weeks, aka the heartbeat law, and does not make exceptions for victims of sexual assault. The only exceptions are if the abortion procedure is necessary to prevent the death of the pregnant woman or to prevent a serious risk of substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function of the pregnant woman. Let me be clear, these exceptions are incredibly vague, so much so in fact that even if you and your doctor thinks you qualify for these exceptions, you still may not qualify because again, the law is vague and people can still be prosecuted even if they follow the law. There was a story I read recently regarding a woman who tried very hard to get pregnant and once she did, she unfortunately ended up miscarrying. As a result, they needed to remove the dead fetus from within her, but the procedure to doing so is very similar to that of an abortion. And you guessed it, she got denied and proceeded to go through the grueling pain of a miscarriage delivery. So when Republicans say that what are allowed by the law, such as removing the fetus during a miscarriage, or in this relevant case of the 10-year-old girl, aborting the fetus if the mother may suffer irreversible damage, that's not often the case, because the law and prosecutors will find ways to redefine your situation, or others mixing in their own beliefs into your situation that will result in you getting denied the care you so desperately need, even though you qualify under exception cases under state law. Thus are the consequences of restricting such an important medical procedure. In theory, it sounds all nice and dandy, but in reality, it is absolutely not. So anyway, this video isn't just going to be about me ranting on Ohio abortion laws. There's a video that has a brief section I want to respond to, which will help me transition to my next points.
This story came out, the progressive left was talking about it, running everywhere, writing articles about it, and I saw a few conservatives, quite a few conservatives come out and say this is a lie, this is a hoax. Now, of course, there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors here. The water is a little muddy because it was hard for them to go and find the specific report of this 10-year-old's rape incident, to find the report about abortion. So numerous conservatives came out and said this is a lie, this is a hoax, this is just the political left trying to galvanize people behind this pro-abortion argument. Come to find out, the story was not a lie.
Yeah, so apparently some Republicans were accusing the story of being fake. Yeah, definitely the proper counter-argument to make. Of course, I can't blame people for being doubtful because anecdotes can be weak, but don't think of this as an anecdote. Think of this as a very, very possible situation that can happen to real people. In terms of what we should do to proceed, it shouldn't matter if this particular situation has happened or not. What matters is that it can happen, and it does happen in a general sense, where people get assaulted, many who are underage, who will need to seek an abortion. That alone should be enough to loosen the laws of abortion restrictions. But no, we have to take the typical American route and only consider this kind of stuff after it happens. And of course, this 10-year-old girl isn't the only one who has suffered through this. Children and people in general getting pregnant as a result of sexual assault happens a lot, and we need to make the law flexible to those who suffer such tragedies. But because rules are not often absolute or clear, such as the example I gave earlier with the miscarriage, practically we cannot help these people while also restricting abortions the way we do. What we realistically need, other than the millions of other reasons we have already, is to legalize abortions and recognize it as a normal medical procedure.
Here's the story of a 10-year-old who was raped by this 27-year-old man, and she had to cross state lines, had to go to Indiana in order to get an abortion. False. Ohio state law actually covers and would have covered this abortion for this young 10-year-old girl. Basically, it's stating that if you need an abortion because it's going to affect your body in a way that is irreversible, or you're not capable of having this pregnancy, carrying it to term, and having the birth of the child, you can get an abortion.
This is an argument that is very commonly thrown around, so I wanted to take a good portion of time talking about this. The short answer is no, Ohio would likely not have covered the abortion because of the way it is defined, which is the major bodily function would be irreversibly damaged. Now, their argument goes like this. The Ohio state law says that one of the exceptions is to prevent a serious risk of the substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function of the pregnant woman. A 10-year-old does not yet have the proper bodily autonomy yet to carry a child to parturition. Therefore, Ohio would cover this case. Now, that is absolutely false, and again, it comes back down to the vagueness of the law. Unfortunately, this irreversible damage does not consider age and the bodily autonomy of the mother. Let me ask you this question. What is to say that a 10-year-old can't give birth to a child while also being perfectly healthy throughout the process? We've seen in history that people even down to the age of 5 has had successful births, while someone who is 10 is significantly more likely to suffer extreme damage and death from giving birth compared to their older counterparts, as evident for younger people having a stupidly higher probability of such death. That doesn't mean this particular 10-year-old girl would die. You can't make an absolute claim until it happens, of course, and that's in the future, and you have to make a decision now. The law's exception covers pregnancy complications of adults, but it does not consider people who are too young who otherwise would be healthy, because this girl's body is perfectly fine. It's just in the current process of developing. If she even has a slimmer of chance of being okay after parturition, that's enough for Ohio state law to restrict your abortion, which is why traveling to Indiana was the only logical decision. So in summary, the law may seem fine, but in practice it is never as beautifully sounding as it is, and until you experience the damage for yourself on what these abortion restrictions mean, you'll never truly grasp how much worse victims of sexual assault have it now under this new post-Roe world.
Then we find out, once we've validated the story, we find out that it's actually true. The 27-year-old man who is responsible for the rape of this 10-year-old girl, disgustingly, is also an illegal immigrant.
I don't give a flying fuck who this perpetrator is, where he is from, or whether or not he's an illegal immigrant. That has absolutely nothing to do with this story. People from all different backgrounds commit crimes, and just because this person happened to be an illegal immigrant changes nothing in the fact that women in this country are being assaulted and raped. Which is important not to be focused entirely on this story in particular. The fact is that tragedies like this happen. For every story you read on the news, there is 1,000 more that goes by unnoticed. I'm not thinking just for this 10-year-old girl. I'm thinking about all the women in the country that has been assaulted or is in the danger of being assaulted.
I hate to say this, but there are plenty of instances where this could happen again with an American citizen, an American male citizen being the perpetrator of a crime like this against a young person, and it could be another 10-year-old.
I just wanted to include that part in case people got the wrong idea that she is making an argument in support of that illegal immigrant point.
They're lying, and now we're sitting here watching two parents point fingers at each other.
I hate America's bipartisan system, but just because it looks like people on the right and left are just yelling at each other does not mean I'm going to distance myself away from the side I'm more aligned with. At the end of the day, I don't care for the two parties. I care for science, I care for what science tells us, and I care for laws and regulations that are best for the people. It just happens that these simply align better with liberal views. Now, I won't deny that I do mix in my personal feelings in much of what I believe. I don't think anyone is really immune to that. That being said, there are some matters which I clearly think has a right or wrong answer, a problem so black and white, and abortion is one of them. Now, before I end this video, let me tell you another story that just happened in Texas, which also clearly demonstrates my point. Now, currently in Texas, the law follows the heartbeat law, which cuts off abortion at about 6 weeks. I made a video a while back explaining why 6 weeks is clearly not enough time, but I won't go into detail about that in this video. Anyway, when we place restrictions in like this, we are redefining medicine and taking that authority away from healthcare providers and into the hands of people who do not work in medicine. The reality is, a heartbeat says incredibly little about the viability of a fetus. A fetus could show clear signs of miscarrying, and it could still have a heartbeat in the current time. Here's an article published in AP News recently where this nearly killed a patient. With the fall of Roe v. Wade, the art of medicine is lost and actually has been replaced by fear, Munoz said. Munoz said he faced an awful predicament with a recent patient who had started to miscarry and develop a dangerous womb infection. The fetus still had signs of a heartbeat, so an immediate abortion, the usual standard of care, would have been illegal under Texas law. We physically watched her get sicker and sicker and sicker until the fetal heartbeat stopped the next day, and then we could intervene, he said. The patient developed complications, required surgery, lost multiple liters of blood, and had to be put on a breathing machine, all because we were essentially 24 hours behind. There are situations like these where recommended abortions being delayed leave permanent and irreversible damage to women. It's funny because the rules are written to protect women from suffering bodily damage, and yet it's the reason they happen. The point of the story is, abortion is a medical issue. To arbitrarily define that using a heartbeat or a certain amount of time is a gross misrepresentation on how reproductive health works. When we restrict abortions or allow states to define their own abortion laws, we are essentially taking those healthcare decisions away from the doctors and putting it into the hands of lawmakers. Such lawmakers know nothing about medicine, nothing about reproductive health, nothing about birth complications, and nothing about pregnancy. And that can have major consequences to all women who happen to live in such strict states. Banning or restricting abortions is more than just taking away a woman's choice. It hurts any medicine that revolves around reproductive health. The only good solution to this is to take the decision-making powers back from the politicians and return it to the hands of doctors. In other words, abortion needs to be decriminalized.